Hi, Ashley. Good morning. Good morning.
Hello, Sam. Good, well, morning, afternoon now, but afternoon for me, nighttime for you.
That is correct. That is correct. Of course, GMT and Thai ST.
There you go.
All right, Ashley, I'm really happy with doing this. It's really good to be online with you in a public forum. And this is being recorded. This is an interview. As you know, I am one of your oldest friends, and whoever's watching would good to know this context. And with that context, I felt that after recently watching Hamdardi as part of your Oscar bid, really connecting with the movie. There was a lot of things that I wanted to know about about background, about motivation, about connection with characters, and particularly knowing your personal life story so intimately as having shared most of it with you. I felt that it would be great if we did this as a live interview, and I thank you for agreeing to it. Um, Yeah, actually, just wanted to start by asking you whether you had any particular intentions around this when I asked you, or any particular thoughts or feelings that came, and then maybe we can start with that. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think the main thing is, like you said, we've known each other since we were like 16, 17, right? And I won't do the math because people then realize how old we really are, but that's a fairly long time.
Mhm.
So we know each other pretty well, and we've navigated, life journeys across different countries and continents together, weaving in and out, but always having this sort of shared connection and friendship. And so I think to talk about the project and the film generally with people is really a blessing because I get to see how it resonates with them and explain the rationale behind it for me. But I think this is slightly different because of that point, because of the fact that we know each other more personally and intimately. And so I'm also curious to see what conversation points come up and what we kind of touch on that might be a little bit different to some of the other interviews that I've done thus far.
Nice, actually. I think that's exactly the intention and context, to be honest with you. Because while this is an interview, this is also a personal sharing, right, between two really close friends.
It's a
Um,
conversation. Interview feels
yeah,
so
yeah.
formal. You're not Larry King. No offense.
I mean, one day,
Maybe.
you know, don't let me quit my day job as of
There you
now.
go.
But
Sam Goyal on CNN.
uh, look, the first question I have, and here's the context, man. Having known you, as you said, since I was 16, we've grown up in Madrid, we've gone through university in New York, we've stayed connected our whole journeys, met in Europe, met in Asia. My question is, when did the whole bloody thing start about acting and movies and film? Because, like, yeah, I mean, when actually in the journey since I've known you, or was it even before?
Oh, you're going there. I wasn't expecting that question, but yeah, let's
Yeah,
do it.
I'm curious. I'm like, when actually,
I
dude?
mean, I think there's a nature nurture to that, right? But I think before I get into the sort of depths of it, I would say high school, probably the year before you actually arrived at ICS. So 15, I did drama, and then also they did like a fake sort of like news thing that we had to make over six
Oh
months,
yeah,
where like
I think I remember you talking about that. Yes.
maybe, yeah, like they gave us roles. It wasn't based on anything other than being really arbitrary. So I was just given the role of writing the script. I'm like, I don't know what to do here. But I wrote the script for
Oh,
this,
you wrote the script.
yeah, for this fake news show. And you remember me, right? Like I would always, at break, if there was break time, I was playing football 9 times out of 10, right? Like that's just what it was. This was the only time that I actually felt like, oh, I'm gonna stay in at break. Like, let's go do this thing. Let's like create this little video for the news show that we have in 3 months. Let's like amend this script. And so it was the first time there was something that actually, from a creative perspective, I kind of latched onto. And it was, I guess, the first course or class, because that's what it was. There's like, oh, this is kind of cool. But big but, and I cannot lie. The fact of having an Iranian father, as you know, and you knew him very well as well, meant that academics was incredibly important and prevalent. And I'm sure that's also something you can maybe attest to with sort of your Indian heritage. People from that part of the world, that's really valuable to them.
Maths and science.
There you go. Like in Iran, it's a joke of you have to be engineer, lawyer, doctor. They just want the best for you, and academics is the
Yeah.
prism they see that through. So it was never a conscious thing at that age to go, this could be a career path. It was just, this
Hey
is
dad, I'm gonna
cool.
grow up and be an actor. He'd be like, Ashley.
Yeah, yeah. My dad had been like, I'm not paying all this money for this schooling for you to just like be some artsy fartsy. Like the fact I did well in history class was bad enough. So like,
And we shared the same
um,
history teacher for that matter, who's one of the most influential teachers I know we both
and
had. So yes,
ironically, said teacher, Mr. Holmes, was a storyteller. The way he did those classes
exactly.
was storytelling. So,
That's right.
that was very interesting that he put on little voices and characters and he brought it to life for the students. And I think that's one reason why it really resonated with me. Um, so it was never consideration as a career. I went to uni, as you know, because we were in the same place at the same time doing our degrees. But for me in that final year, I was like, something is like a little remiss. I don't really feel like there's got to be more, I think was the sentiment underlying it. So I very kind of covertly just started feeling out where I could go and start taking classes and like student films and just
Oh,
learning the
interesting.
ropes. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I just because I didn't know what I didn't know. It was such a new thing to me. Being in the UK was more beneficial than being in Spain because there's more of a market here. So I think ironically that gave me more of an option to find things that were good, find things that weren't great, and kind of fall on my sword a little bit. Um, and then it just built from there. And, over the years, those small little student films became independent short films. The small agent became a slightly bigger agent, and you start to get better auditions. And then all of a sudden, the wheels and momentum very slowly start to move. So that's the acting part of it. Then 10 years ago, the creating films part came into play. That came later.
Actually, and this is first of all, it's so nice to um, like I'm seeing you as your 16, 17-year-old self, as your 20, 21-year-old self, as your mid 25, mid 20-year-old self, and then getting to, as you say, 10 years ago, which is the 30s, because we're both basically the same age. So that was 10 years ago. And it's so interesting as you're telling the story. I'm like, oh, then. And at least for what's interesting for people to know who are watching this, that hey man, even one of your closest friends didn't quite really know that you had this part of your life and interest over and above, of course, sharing common content and watching films and joking about. I mean, you always had this satirical view, right? Your humor was, yeah, highly satirical, and you always had this Chandler-esque vibe when you had your one-liners, And I remember that in the high school days, actually. I remember and I've seen you grow into your own um, character, your own persona of actor, right? And of
Hmm.
course, it's like that when you like with actors that we see on TV, we don't know them. We just see them as actors. But in the case that I know you and I'm watching you in a movie and completely forgetting that I know you because I'm so enthralled in the character, which is what happened with Hamdardi. I think that's for me when I'm like, shit, he's a great actor, you know?
Well,
So,
that's the biggest compliment you could probably give an actor who you know personally, that you don't look at the screen and say, "Oh, that's my friend," because that's the whole point to sort of
but that
suspend
was what happened
disbelief.
the first time I watched it, actually. That's why it was
Oh,
different. This time I was watching
interesting.
it with another person and, you know, yeah, really tuning in. So just coming back to this here, what you talked about, this milestone of hitting that creative juncture, right? Turning away from just actor or side hustle, but really looking at getting deeper involved in the film value chain, let's call it, and the creative process. As a business guy, I'll always see that, value chain. So here was the next question that I had. Firstly was, you know, what do you think are certain characteristics of a good film? I mean, like, give me 3 points. What does a good film contain? Well, yeah, three characteristics of a good film.
It's a good question because I think it's also subjective to the audience, right? So I think one characteristic of a good film is that they acknowledge that you can't appease everybody. So, I think the key is trying to make a film that you, as much as you can, stay true to from your creative vision. And that can be difficult, I guess, if you have multiple people involved and different financiers and producers, and sometimes the creative kind of process gets diluted and the vision gets diluted because too many cooks, right? But
No,
I
but
think
so give me three specific characteristics of a good film. I'll bring you back to some punchy. clear, sharp answers. So give
Right.
me
Well, if
three.
we
Like
get
what?
more technical,
Forget the
yeah,
disclaimers. Forget the subjectivity, objectivity thing. Give me three characteristics for you. What is a good film?
for me, I think so. One is I want to see a clear arc for that main protagonist. I want to see a journey. I want to see someone that goes through some kind of evolution because that's something the audience can go on as a journey themselves, right? That's life.
That's a really, really good,
That's
clear
life.
characteristic. Yeah.
That's life. I mean, that's it really is the main fundamental. And then beyond that, these are more personal things.
Mm,
I like films that are, I don't want to say quite open-ended, but that they allow the audience to engage and think and ruminate over ideas.
interesting.
You know, sometimes it's nice to
Mhm.
be spoon-fed a film too, right? Like, don't get me wrong, it's nice just to switch your brain off. But I think if I think as a film as art, I want it to engage some kind of thought process in an audience member. Um, so those would be two really big ones. And
Mhm.
then,
Give me a technical one. I'm curious from a technical angle.
oh, well, I think that's subjective. All I would say to that is because I'm not like a technical DOP. No, no, but I think what I would say to that is
Hmm.
I believe that my friend Adam, who's a DOP and works the camera,
What is a DOP for the layman,
director of
please?
photography. So he's a cinematographer and he helps to create the frame. And so for me, the best films are the ones where they understand that the camera work is an aid of the story. It's not about a pretty picture. It's
Nicely said.
about how can the camera show things emotionally that the characters aren't saying or can't say.
Interesting, Ashley. That's a
Um,
very astute and precise point. And why I'm asking you these questions is I've recently seen your film, which I think is not just a good film; it's a great film.
Thank you.
And it's interesting from your views about what you think is a great film. You know, the one thing I noticed that I didn't hear from you now, I'm sure there's a longer list, and I just asked for three. But for me, the first characteristic of a great film is that it makes you feel, man.
Right.
It makes you feel emotion,
Yeah, yeah.
connection, some bloody damn thing, right? And I think I understand that from that protagonist's journey, right? Obviously, this notion of facing this arc, as you call it, of facing some kind of difficulty and overcoming that through something that makes an audience member connect, right, with that journey. But that's really interesting. And in that
Well,
same
what I'd
flow, I
say
want,
to that really quickly is I think it's sort of you doing what you
please.
do best, knowing you, that you've gone very macro from sort of the top level, almost bird's eye view of it, which is I think the three things I said are probably pillars or strands that feed into that ultimate concept of making
Mm,
someone
mm.
feel, right? Like
Yeah, I
those are
had tears
usually
in my eyes at the end and through that movie. I mean, there was some, I don't want to spoil it, but there was some highly emotionally uncomfortable scenes where the characters are going through some pretty difficult shit. And you, as the audience member, are forced to confront a lot of, your own, in my cases, having been in these similar situations, Uh,
right.
yeah, it's very resonant. It's very emotional. And I think that's one of the things to yeah, whoever gets a chance to watch Hamdardi, which I hope you do put it out there on a wider platform after the Oscars, so we can all see it uh, yeah, to feel right. But
Mm.
anyway, another question I had is, uh, man. So look, what does a producer actually do?
You tell me. You tell me.
I don't know. I just see so many
Yeah.
people who produce left,
There's
right, and
so
things,
many like different.
executive producers. What does a producer actually do, Ashley?
Right. So it's interesting, and there's different components to it. I think a lot of people might assume producers are only the money people. And that's probably
Oh, that's
true.
what they do. That's a part of it.
It's a big part of it, right? Like
Financing,
sourcing the financing,
getting the
managing that
money
budget.
together.
But there's
Mhm.
different sort of types of producers. There's line producers are more involved with maybe the day-to-day, the logistics, making sure that everyone's in the right place at the right time. There's so many moving
Okay.
parts on a film. You've got to feed people, you've got to transport people, you've got to accommodate people, all these things. Um, an executive producer or an associate might be more of like think of like a consultant for a business in that context, right? They're maybe not as deep on the day to day and the granular stuff, but they might, be like an ambassador. Maybe they're a name that lends some weight to the film
Mm.
to attach financing. Um, but I think the really key thing to mention is that a lot of the best producers, they don't just get involved from the finance side, they get involved early on in the creative process. So they'll partner
Aha,
with a
that's what I
director.
was, yes, wondering whether there's any creativity that comes around
Yeah, yeah,
producing.
yeah. 100%. I think the best ones will partner with the producer to actually, or with the director, I should say, to like create and cultivate the vision together. It's why if you look at like Christopher Nolan, well, his wife is a producer who he produces a lot of the films with. Robert Downey Jr.'s wife is a producer. They make some films
Interesting.
together. And so,
Good
you know,
examples.
it's examples of people that they're actors and they also have made films, but they've produced them with producers early on in the process so that that creative vision is followed through.
It's very
Yeah.
specific and very clear, man. And then the reason I'm asking you these questions, so from what I saw in the credits of Hamdardi, it seems that you've done a lot of different roles and worn a lot of different hats by written, produced, directed, and starred by Ashley Tabatabai. So, yeah, what did you actually do? I mean, did you do the whole damn thing, and how did you pull it off?
Yeah, it's always a bit cringe when you see like a film and like the 20% of the credits are just one person's name. But
Well, not
um,
really for me. I'm like, see, that's my bro. I mean, it's different again, like cringe was not what came to me at all.
well, I,
FYI.
I would put extra context to this and say it was a very ambitious short film, right? We tried to make an American airport in the UK, and it wasn't just two people in a room. There's lots of actors and supporting actors
Dude,
to
amazing how you try. Like you can't tell. Like what looks like it is the US.
right.
It's
So,
really well
for
rendered.
that, we needed a crew of about 60 plus people. And then actors wise, there's about 20 actors with some form of dialogue and another 40 that were just supporting characters in terms of just being people there on the day to fill out the space to make it feel authentic. So that's a lot for a short film. And I say this specifically because whilst it's one person who has maybe some of these bigger name credits, there's a lot of other people that come together to make all this happen. It is like the circus convening to create this illusion or magic trick that you then see at the end for 27 minutes. So yeah, like I co-directed. I had a friend who helped direct with me and did the editing. That was very helpful because knowing that I was going to perform in it, it was important to have someone on the day who could at least be mindful of technical aspects or bits of performance that I wouldn't have the bandwidth for.
Yeah, because you're in front of the camera, and then
Well, and it
who's
happened a few
directing the
times. Yeah, like when I'm in scenes with Aryan, who plays the young Iranian brother, and Isla, the young
Mhm.
girl. And they asked me questions like, how is this coming across on screen? And the answer is, I don't know because I'm with you in person. In person, it reads to me, but I don't know what it looks like on the screen because I can't.
Interesting.
So someone else was keeping an eye on that
Hmm.
when I'm in the scenes with them. Um, from the writing side, that's kind of compartmentalized because that happened so early in the process that it evolved slightly, but it was almost that's phase one. And then pre-production, production, post-production, the way I frame it is it's my vision, so it's on me to be able to explain that, and then for people to buy into it or not, and then to then give them the trust and bandwidth to say, cool, I know you can do the job. Here's the ball, run with it. Here's the vision. We all know what it is. Let's converge. If I can't explain that clearly, then we'll get a bad product. This is business. It's the same thing. It's like a startup with all these people. And if you can't explain your vision clearly, you don't get a clear result. So that was key. Time was helpful to not rush things. And because it had to be authentic, we needed to have the right people in who were at the top of their game and like keen to bring this to life. So yeah, I wore many hats, but so did other
I mean,
people in
just on
different
that
ways.
point, yeah, exactly. On that motivation, I mean, that's one of the things I really noticed. The crew is, it really felt like a motivated and committed crew, Ashley, And I think that now I understand why this ability to explain your vision, especially when you frame it like a startup, that makes sense. I mean, clearly you've put your heart and soul into this thing, but it's much more than just you, right? It's this whole, yeah, let's call it organism of people that have all kind of bought into your vision to help bring it to life, man, in a very cohesive and impactful way. Kudos to you guys, really.
Oh, thank you, man. Well, that's it. It's one of those where you look back and go, I don't know how we did it, but we did it. And before doing it, it's kind of like, I don't know how we're going to do it, but we'll do it. And so the whole thing of like the how was almost none of our business. It was one step at a time, like iterative process. You know what I mean? What's next? Okay, I need authentic costumes. I've got to talk to Elsa, my costume designer. She's going to give me the lowdown. She knows things I don't know. For example, like I've got them. Oh, I've not got them here. Well, I do. Oh, the badge. This is a badge that we made, right? For
Yes,
the patrol officers. Now it looks almost exactly like a real one, but you can't for legal reasons do that.
yes,
I didn't know
yes.
that. I needed Elsa, my costume designer, to say, legally, you've got to make at least three changes to the original design, even if they're minor, so that you don't fall into copyright issues. But also, when you're, especially with officers, you
Or
can't
getting
be
of it, police impersonation issues,
exactly,
Ashley.
you
I think
can't
that
be
would be
seen
slightly
to.
more hot
That's
water
it. No,
than
but that is it. You
copywriting.
can't be seen to be impersonating an officer, so you have to
Right.
modify things like designs on the costumes. Then you've got to get
Interesting.
the right fit for all the actors. Then, okay, the next process. Where do we shoot this? How do we make immigration booths? What's the cost behind that? How are we? All these things. If you start from the beginning and think of everything, you overwhelm yourself. You won't do it.
Man, it's like a startup. It's You've basically launched a startup, developed a product, brought a bunch of people together, raised the money, handled ops, logistics, and now you're doing basically the post-production marketing, getting it out there. I can really resonate to it. This is like wow, really
Yep.
well framed, Ashley. Really well framed. Mm. So it's really nice this segue you've given me, which is your vision, and talking about how you've explained it. Obviously, actually, you and me share a lot of you know life, and therefore we shared a lot of joy as well as a lot of sorrow, which is life, right? In both in each other's lives and in the shared overlap that we have. For me, one of the reasons this movie was uh, all the more impacting is knowing how much of you was in that movie in your life, in terms of events, themes, um, you know, yeah. So what I wanted to ask you on camera, which I'm sure has been asked, but when I'm asking it, it obviously hits closer. I hope so, at least. And then the question is that because this movie, for me, watching it, it felt deeply personal, right? Knowing you, it felt deeply personal for you. So my question is, yeah, what are some of the life events that this movie was inspired by, Ashley? And in what specific ways did those life events, yeah, mm, affect your life? Um, and then you can feel free to be as specific or as vague as you'd like to be.
I'll start with the main catalyst for the film and then maybe splinter from there. But the genesis of it is that in 2017, when the ban was in play, my cousin, who was in Iran at the time, wasn't able to go and visit her dad, who was in San Francisco on a green card, completely legal, with my aunt when he was taken ill in the ICU. And over the course of a couple of months, it was very clear that he didn't have very long left. My other cousin, her brother was in Philly on a student visa, and so he was able to be there, but she was alone in Iran effectively with other family members from the extended family. But when you learn that, you haven't gone through this, but some people listening might have, when you're losing a parent and which is actually a gift if you know, as opposed to being sudden, you would want to have the opportunity, if you have a good relationship, to go and see them and spend some final moments with them. She didn't get to do that just because she was from a country that was on a list that arbitrarily said no one, no matter what, can come into the country. then beyond that, when he finally passes, she couldn't go and be with her family because, as I said, her mom and brother were already in America. So then the mourning process and the grieving, which is a huge part of it, she had to effectively kind of do alone. And so that was a big part of that. I remember being, I think I was in the Tate Modern with my dad, and she called him, and we spent an hour there, not even looking at an exhibition. There was an exhibition about Iran, and that's why we went. And we ended up just going to like a little corner, and he was just trying to like talk to her or let her talk to him so that she could just express. So that I think was the immediate catalyst and the most obvious catalyst for it. Then, the year later, after this happened, so this was 2017, I wrote the script in 2018. I've said a few times in Q&As, it's very corny, but it's the best way I can describe it. It didn't feel like it came from me. It felt like it came through me in terms of the narrative. It was reasonably fluid in terms of coming up with the story. Um, and I'd also seen by that point that, this wasn't just my relatives, it was many other families that had been kept apart, and many other people that didn't get to live out their lives that had hopes and dreams, and America being this idea and this beacon of light of land of the free and home of the brave and opportunities are there at your doorstep. Well, it is for many, but it wasn't for people from these countries. And um, they were regular people. And then in the media, you would see that a lot of this was reported, like happens even today, based from a very numbing perspective of just numbers and stats. And I think it would be too overwhelming for us as individuals to try and absorb every human element of all these stories because there's so much that happens. But it's easy to forget that there are humans
It's easy
behind.
to dehumanize it, right? And that's the other danger, right? When you just keep it on
Right.
a statistical level.
Right. And so all of these things and factors, I think, were some of the themes I think that hopefully are woven into the film that come from that starting point in 2017. Um, Now, I think if you go slightly beyond that in terms of even more personal experience, look, like my dad was from Iran. He left in the 70s. He came to Europe. He traveled around. He lived a good life. But people would still stop him in airports or when traveling or say certain things to him. Many, I'm sure I'm not even privy to, but some that I was privy to simply because he had a different sounding name or looked slightly darker skinned. And like slightly. My dad wasn't that dark, but he wasn't pure white. I'm effectively a white looking person. I mean, I am, let's be honest. But even I have the minor, not even inconvenience of having been random checked so many times that it's not random, simply because of my last name, right? Now, through the process of doing this film and now putting it out into the world, it's very interesting to see that a lot of people from these parts of the world, lots of Iranians and people from Syria and Lebanon, they feel the resonance with it because they feel understood or seen. And you realize that they might not even been impacted by the ban implicitly, but every one of them has some kind of story about them or someone they know within their circle who's had some issue at some kind of airport because of how they look, or just when they've come to a, more westernized country, they feel like they're being observed or judged differently.
Profile, let's just get real. I mean, it is what it is.
Well, I'm not just talking about like this sort of systems. I'm even just talking about like general populace, and that's not everybody, obviously. But it's interesting I bring it up because there was someone who came up to me a few weeks ago at a Q&A, and she said she's half Iranian, half Greek, and she lived in Qatar and never once questioned anything about like how she looked or her skin pigmentation until she moved to the UK. And then all of a sudden it became very apparent to her that all of a sudden she had brown skin and what that entails, which
Yeah, I
shouldn't
mean,
make a
let's
difference.
be real, Ashley. This is nothing new. We've grown up
But
in the
that's my
north of Iran,
point,
right? I
right? And
mean,
so again, like,
but yeah, but well, I think this is the thing, right? I was thinking when I was preparing for this session, but I'm going to ask about the themes of the movie and so on. But I'm sure you've been a lot through that. But I want to bring it back to those personal experience. And firstly, thanks for sharing that. I do remember when you went through that and what was happening, especially the social media campaign. That was a powerful tool, right, in those days to raise awareness. And In those days, I was still plugged into social media.
Mhm.
So I remember you going through that, and then, but what I really, again, not to give things away, but I found that what you recreated, irrespective of your personal story and connection with it, which was of course quite apparent for me and anybody who knows you, uh, is a standalone story, standalone theme that I for one resonated. Man, I have been stopped, I have been denied visa, even with valid visa. I have been held overnight. I know. In our Spain days, right when we, I mean, as a student in an international school in a fine establishment, right, in a posh part of town, and yet when you go through those borders, when you go through that immigration, but and just for the record, there's also been some very pleasant surprises. Going back to America after all those years, after living in New York for so many years. In my mind, I'm like, oh, they're gonna check me, they're gonna check that. It's all good. They're like, hey, welcome back, and I'm like, oh wow, that's a nice reception.
Right.
So,
And I like that. That's
it is
important.
those positive stories that I also want to remember.
Well, but that's important because that was important to me too. It wasn't ever a case of these are the good ones and those are the bad ones. It's not about
Mm,
that. Life's a gray area. We weren't wanting to paint officers as being evil, malicious, like, Darth Vader-esque with the Empire behind them.
mm,
No, they are people
hmm.
doing jobs. 9 times out of 10, they're just regular people doing their job. They've been given an initiative that they have to execute.
That's
And,
right.
can we empathize with everybody, irrespective of the job title or label? That's kind of the, again, theme of the film in many ways.
And that's exactly why I was resonating, right? Because again, not to spoil it, but there's this very clear struggle of this theme that is prevalent, and how different characters deal with that struggle of sticking to the initiatives, or being, let's say, more human. And how do you balance that, right? One is doing your duty, doing your job, and protecting your country's immigration rights and following the damn orders that are given by the government of the day. And on the other side, seeing this real human shit, man. This is, I mean, clearly, it mustn't also be easy, right, for the other side to sit and reject and deny these people. And of course, you could see that with your character and his experience. Uh, yeah. How did you? So that was one question I had, actually. Like, how did you connect with the main character, with your character? How did you? I guess there, as we're talking, right, different sides to that. But yeah, tell me more how you connected with that character that you portrayed very well. I must say that you did.
Thank you. I mean, I think most people in some capacity can relate to the fact that they just do a job that they kind of clock in through, and they've done it at some point in their lives, right? So take away the bells and whistles of the setting of this is a guy who's working as an immigration officer, like is a dude doing a job. I think that's even one of the lines. He says, "I'm just doing my job here." I think many people can relate to that, the frustrations of that. And then another part of it was like this idea of a system or something outside of ourselves that somehow magically one day, if we're good boys and girls, will reward us. And then at what point do you get to in life where you realize that's not always the case and the cavalry's not coming because there is no cavalry except you? And so those are big elements, I think, for him that he's trying to sort of go through this process and he's gone through grief, and whilst the grief for him is losing a partner, which I haven't in terms of someone passing, I can relate to losing people that are important to you that have passed when my dad passed. And so there are, you know, similarities in that sense of a grieving person that you can bring into it subtly. And none of this was overt, but it was just, it's there, it's life experience coming out on screen.
Interesting. Absolutely.
Um, but then, yeah, like that idea of to what extent do you sort of listen to your own moral compass as opposed to just following what you're told by? And something as you knew my dad pretty well that it was instilled in me and that he would always kind of say was, like question things, not to be pedantic, but more out of curiosity. And so my dad was in his own right a little bit rebellious too, and I think that organically probably comes through me in some
Politely said, Ashley.
what I have to do. But I do think it's important too. Like I think we should be questioning things and like
Of
why do we do
course,
things?
man.
Right. So implicit belief in things that people tell us like that's going to make our life better doesn't necessarily play out. And I think that was something that I could tap into with this character who's
I
frustrated.
mean, look, knowing your dad as I do, who was like a second dad to me for a long time in my life, that I like how you said it's not rebelling for the sake of rebelling. It's not like, oh, just let me make my point. No, it's not. It's like you said, it's a deep questioning. Like, why should this be the way it is, right? Particularly when it can be a better way.
Right.
Right, and those were definitely a lot of conversations, as you know, we used to have, your dad, yourself, and myself, particularly your dad and me, about politics of the time, right? Or different current issues, or even in the old days, these historical things that are now being played back again. And lo and behold, shit, at the time of launching, look how things in the world are. Like, history is, wouldn't say repeating, it's like this lovely quote: history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. And
Oh,
history is
yeah.
rhyming really hard right now, Ashley.
That's true. That's true.
Huh?
Yep.
Yeah,
Ironically.
it's so interesting, isn't it? I wonder if your dad was still here and observing all this in the world, and seeing these cycles. I'm sure you'd have a choice few comments to make.
Probably. Probably.
Oh man, amazing. Yeah, yeah. I like how you said. Wow, I was getting a little emotional there. I like how you said connecting with the character through personal experience, and in this case, loss and grief. And this is what's interesting for me. The character is a character, right? He's a fictional character to a large extent because he's in a movie. But that was one other question I had, and when I'm looking at the time, we got about 5 minutes left. But there was one other question I had with regards to this. So, you talked about your cousin and their family and what they went through, and being a large part of the inspiration. So I can see that parallel in some of the characters. Were there any of these other characters that were real or like inspired by real events? Uh, you know?
No, I don't think so. I think then things came into the equation. I mean, there were lines maybe as opposed to characters. I think that's a better way to frame it.
Hmm.
Certain bits of dialogue or lines were taken from either third-party accounts that I researched or things that had been said to people I knew. For example, there's a line in the film when the antagonist officer, the older officer Hank, first meets these two siblings, and he's got the passport, and he turns to them and says, Arab? And the brother says, broken English, no, Iran, I'm from Iran. And he's like,
Yeah.
Arab, come with me.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
That sounds like a very far-fetched thing if you're not sort of aware of like maybe what like that's basically something that was said to my dad in New York. That's like verbatim. So lines were taken and fed into certain characters, and perhaps were some of the initial seeds that then germinated them into being the characters they were. But I wouldn't
Mm,
say that those characters, like Hank or say the lawyer who is there to sort of be the mediator,
mm, mm,
were based on anyone in particular. Nor were the siblings per se based on anyone in particular. They're almost like a
mm.
representation of my
Yeah, that's what I
cousin.
was saying. You could draw the parallels and then see the connection.
Yeah, like none of
And
these characters, even my character, none of them are based on anyone in my family. That would be too, it's not about that. They are inspired by
mm,
them and other people who have stories from the band and even prior and post the band, I guess, as well. And so a lot of it was writing around the actors that I knew were going to be involved and playing to their strengths, taking these lines from real life and feeding them in, and then how you kind of piece the puzzle together. And then the key thing is obviously how do you make all these different characters mean something to one another? So then actually it's not
mm.
about making it reflect a real life human. It's about how do these characters exist as humans for those 27 minutes on screen.
Deep, Ashley. I like it. See, this is exactly why I could connect with these characters. They were humans. They weren't these flat 2D kind of. I mean, I think a lot of the movie is about the characters, right? It's. I mean, the plot is it's not some thriller, spy thriller with who done it kind of thing, right? It's not necessarily it really is about these characters. And for me, at least as an audience, the emotions and the pretty strong emotions. It's pretty deep, bro. I'm like, wow. I was just so Yeah,
Well, it's an ensemble piece. It's an ensemble piece. We've spoken a lot about my character, and understandably, because you were asking about me personally feeding into that. But these other characters are just, if not more important.
yes, yes. Alchemy,
Um,
just I mean, magic. With this. I mean,
well, but
wow.
that's the thing.
The little
Everything,
girl. I mean, Jesus.
first ever acting job, never acted before professionally.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable.
I bet everything has to mean something for me. If you go back to that first question of what makes a good
Mm,
film,
mm.
if it's in the film, it's got to mean something, right? Like, I don't want filler. Like, if you show me something, what's the context behind it? If it doesn't mean
Yeah,
anything
like every
here,
scene or every kind of interaction, or and I'll give this last little um, parable. Not that it's in it's a very different kind of movie, but I recently watched one of Sorrentino's movies, the recent one, The Great Beauty. At this point you just made about everything meaning something, that's what I also take away, Ashley. And I suppose in a short film, it's all the more precious, right? Every moment. You don't have an hour and a half to diddle around and dither around a plot or try to fluff some characters depth when there really isn't. And in your case, you kind of have to compress this connection that we feel as the audience in a pretty short amount of time, right? That's probably one episode on a sitcom's worth, right? 25, 27 minutes, as you mentioned. So that's the kind of thing I'd like to end on, Ashley, which were some of those moments uh, that I mean, the movie is designed clearly to evoke certain things due to plot, and so what you're doing, right, in terms of wanting the audience to feel certain things. So my question is, which of those key moments that we as audience members are like either like, oh fuck, that's happening, or like, oh my god, or like, wow, or like, you know, so which of those moments are most memorable to you as being behind the camera, being the creator, being the actor? Maybe give me two or three of those moments
do
that
you
that
mean
really.
retrospectively watching it now, or do you mean in the moment when we were doing it on set?
Oh, great refinement of the question. I mean both. So let's break the question into two parts. So one is, what are some of the moments from making it, or starring, or producing it, that you're like, shit, man, that was just priceless.
Yeah, I'll do that, and then I'll ask the other one where
Yes,
retrospectively they're ones that
yes,
resonate
yes,
with me,
that's
right?
right.
So in terms of filming it, um, again, like we were building a world of an American airport in the UK at an arena. Most short films from having done them are much smaller in scale in terms of the number of people and maybe the ambition of trying to recreate an American airport. So to step onto that first day at the arena and know that everybody had really bust their ass to put up the signs, and we had a few hours to get the booths together, and we then had to bring the actors on, and then you kind of step on and you see the lights there and you go, okay, like we've turned something that was a barren concession concourse 3 hours ago into this set. And
Crazy.
so it's I think the film looks far more expensive than what it really is in terms of actual money, which is predicated on all these time, all these people coming together. The again, Adam, our director of photography, being able to get great deals on equipment and knowing how to really elevate the look. So on the day that, because that was such a big set piece and so key to us, was a big moment because that almost for me was going to make or break. Like it's sort of, how do we sell this? I looked at the
So they're
terminal.
like, you must have like watched see it and be like, shit, it feels real.
Well, that's it.
We
And it's sort of
pulled
like
it off.
we're here now. We have to make this work as well. It was a bit of it too, right? But American flags are amazing. You just put them in the frame and it sells it for you
And like,
perfectly.
America, yeah,
America.
amazing.
So that was a big one because that was like, our big opening piece to the movie, really, that sets the tone. Um, and then I think, there's a few scenes that I'm in, but not. Like there's a scene in a boardroom between the lawyer and the two kids and this officer
Mm,
who's kind of detaining them. And I'm in the
mm,
background. I don't really talk. But it was, a couple of hours of me getting to just stand there and watch and let them do their thing,
amazing, amazing,
you know? And
amazing.
to know that that's
Oof,
something that was
oof,
written 2 years prior, and now they're just taking it and they're making it their own. To get to watch it was, one of many moments. But those
dude,
two,
unbelievable, unbelievable. I couldn't even imagine that because, again, as the audience, we just see you, all of you there, right? Like you watching them act in front of just
right,
crazy,
with
dude.
words
Which
that
is
you've
your
written,
story and I'm sure when you wrote it, so I wondered as when you wrote it, did you visualize these characters? Did you already
some of
have a
them, because
visual of
like
them?
so like the lawyer or the character of Hank, both those actors were people I wanted to do these roles when writing, so I wrote with them in mind. So for them, for sure. For the siblings, they evolved because they came to us through casting, and so Arian, who plays the brother, came in with ideas and he added layers, and then all of a sudden his character informed other characters, and so there's an older character who gets taken back to Syria, played by an actor called Emilio, and um, I was going to make that a younger character in the original script. As soon as Aryan came on and started talking to me, I realized this guy needs to be older. He needs to be the physical reflection of the father figure that the boy is trying to reach. And also at the same time, and this is the thing about every character and everything meaning something, whilst he only has a handful of scenes, he's so important because he's a foil for Hank, the older officer who's staunch in his ways, and this guy is very calm in adversity and chaos whilst questioning. But also, he shows the younger brother the way. That the younger brother comes in with a journey of being quite hot and antagonistic and rebellious and angry, understandably. But that by the end, he goes through his own journey. That part of that's aided through the prism of seeing this more elder statesman who still,
Yes.
amidst
Dignity, Ashley. The theme of that
dignity,
whole
exactly.
thing was dignity. This, and I could see how that character was, you felt it, and this is the one thing I really resonated with. I'm like, dude, what the fuck? You have a valid US visa. You know how hard it is to get one of those things, how much vetting, due diligence, how much time, energy, and money people have to spend and invest in their countries to be able to get a US visa. Once you have it, it's valid for 10 years. It's that much of a big deal. And then to just be denied entry, it's outrageous, right? And then to see like, you know, people who have the ability to get a US visa generally in a pretty, you know, uh, higher place in society in those countries, right? They're accomplished people, respectable people, wealthy people, people who have done something or the other to be able to afford a life where you can travel and then clear the due diligence of America is not easy, man. So,
Right.
for me to see that and then the way they were treated is just, yeah, man. Another reason that emotion was being evoked. Big theme of dignity, and trust in the
And I
system
think
and
so. That's a
so many
scene.
other things.
That's a scene retrospectively, just to quickly answer that part of your question that
Yes,
stands out. There's a scene between the two siblings where it's just the two of them at the end almost and
yes,
talking to each other. And it's very organic and raw. And it's a young brother being there for his sister and just holding space for her amidst the uncertainty of all of this. And I think both of them did such a amazing job that that's one that when I watch back encapsulates the rawness of what this is, which is they're just kids, they're just humans, and they're facing all these fears, but somehow they still came together and were there for one another. And that's a really beautiful scene that I personally like to look back on because it does incite, a particular emotion. And there's others that are more volatile that also incite an emotion that might be different for different people. Some emotions might range from anger to you know, rage even. I don't know, like any emotion is still a valid one. And I think for us, it was important to be authentic to what we're putting out on screen and not hold back on stuff just to be safe, like if I go back to my original point of films that make people think and question, hopefully this does because we didn't try and mollycoddle through some of the realities.
yeah. Well said, man. Good movie you guys made, Ashley. Good movie you made, dude.
Thank
I
you.
enjoyed it very much. Really, really.
Thank you, man.
Yeah, it's a good one. Yes, yes, yes. All right, bro. Listen, we've hit our time, but it went so fast. It really is. But the last thing I want to say, uh, for the record, I was the second person who said that Ashley is going to win an Oscar. The first, as we know well, Ashley, who that dear gentleman is your lovely father. But yeah, man, I really hope that at the very least through this, you and your team and your product. I mean, it sounds stupid to call it a product, but your production is a better way to say it. At least gets the recognition of the hard work that went into it. I hope it has a chance to connect with more hearts and more people. And also, in these turbulent times where history is busy rhyming away, let's hope this shit doesn't happen again. Um, and if it does, well, at least let's show each other a bit more Hamdardi, man. Isn't it?
I agree. Thank you, man.
Yeah.
Thank you
Oh,
for those beautiful words at the end. And yeah, that's what it's about. Hamdardi, which it's empathy, it's compassion.
that's right.
Um, and that's, something that is a Farsi word that also translates over into Urdu and some of your heritage.
That's right.
Again, if
That's
that's a way to
exactly
button
right.
this off, two people from totally different parts of the world who came together at
Right.
16, coming together again now over a Zoom, albeit, but still sharing commonalities through words and phrases and life experiences that beyond the labels, we can bond and be more similar than being divided apart because I look one way, you look another way, or I did say
Or
this.
you have this name and I have that name, or you have this passport and I have that passport, right?
Exactly.
Yes. Hopefully that's also something that we will. The audience, the more the audience that gets to experience this lovely film, that will get a chance to, yeah, just feel a bit more of those human things, man. Ashley, hopefully, it can leave the world a slightly better place.
That's the hope.
All right, my brother. I wish you all the best for the movie success. I really hope to see it gain more traction, and wishing you guys really the next big step ahead, man. All the best, bro.